Dr. Dani Rabwin with Ready, Vet, Go, the podcast, and I am so excited for today's episode. I have one of my heroes and mentors, Dr. Peter Weinstein. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Peter.
Dr. Dani, heroes and mentors, that makes me feel old.
Okay, this is how old you are, and this is how long we've known each other.
Right.
So we met, I was just doing the math today, 25 years ago.
You're killing me.
I know, I'm sorry, I had to do it. It was the summer of 2000, and I was an incoming freshman first-year veterinary student at UC Davis. And I was one of a couple dozen incoming students who was selected to do a leadership course prior to starting vet school, and you ran that course. And that is how we first met.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. And we just reconnected within the last 5 or 6 years as you went and grew up and I grew old.
That's exactly right. So in my mind, like with many, people who come into our lives as teachers or mentors, in my mind, your life began when I met you during that leadership course. But I know that there was a lot that went into getting you to the place where you were somebody in a leadership position and running that course. And we think of you as kind of a guru, or at least I do, a leadership guru in the veterinary space. And so I'm curious to know, because I don't even know this, like what happened prior to me knowing you 25 years ago when you started that leadership course? What was the trajectory and how did you get into this whole leadership position?
Well, to be honest with you, I had no leadership inclinations when I was in high school, no leadership inclinations when I was in college, and really no leadership inclinations when I was in veterinary school. Somebody has to be a follower. And so there's a whole lot of other strong personalities that were out there that I was following. I just didn't have that. My parents had some leadership roles in the variety of things that they did, but I don't think I started to develop interest in leadership until my second or third job out of veterinary school, when I was working for Dr. John Hamill, who Dr. G knows, in Laguna Beach. And John was the either president or president-elect of the California Veterinary Medical Association. And so I got to see him try to deal with issues that were impacting the veterinary profession. And he started to, I'd like to say drag, but how about coax me to go to local organized veterinary medicine. And so I started to attend some local VMA meetings. Then I opened my own hospital. And I realized how important leadership is when you have followers yourself. So for the prior 30 some odd years, I was a follower, and then I had people who worked for me. And even as an associate veterinarian, you don't always consider yourself a leader because you're working for somebody else and people are working with you as a team. But as as an owner, you have to kind of show that leadership. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I was an entrepreneur without a clue. Until I started to read on leadership, and I think going back and getting an MBA helped from that standpoint. And I can continue because that was, God knows how long ago it was, but it took a while, and it took a change in attitude of one of being a follower to one of being an influencer.
I love hearing that perspective. It's like so many things in our, career trajectories. There was somebody who was in a position of influence for you who opened your eyes to that role. I'm curious to know, you talk about leadership in kind of the realm of being a practice owner, but clearly lots of veterinarians who are not owners are in leadership positions as well. And I suspect that you knew that and wanted us to know that when you decided to come back and do things like teach a leadership course at a veterinary school. So, like, how do you incorporate the experience that you learned as a leader, being a practice owner, and then passing on that knowledge and wanting to teach people who are going to go into lots of, different fields or different aspects of the veterinary profession?
So there's an interesting backstory to all of this. Dr. Don Klingborg, who was the head of that program, and I had met through CVMA, California VMA, and we were talking about his business class that he taught at UC Davis, and I came up a couple of different times to do some talks as part of the course. I think I talked on building teams and team building and marketing and just some different things, and we were talking about needs within the profession. Now, at that point in time, I had gotten more involved with organized veterinary medicine. I was probably in a leadership role with the Southern California VMA. I may have been getting ready to become part of the California VMA Board of Directors or Board of Governors. And I talked to Don and I said, where are the weaknesses? What can we do to help the veterinary students be better prepared after graduation? And he said, there's an area that I'm very passionate about that could use some help, and that is leadership development. And so we got together and started to look at what would a leadership onboarding program be to integrate leadership training into veterinary students at Davis. And I helped provide some funding for the program through a foundation that I'm a part of. And so we, for a number of years, funded the leadership training at UC Davis, and that's how I became involved. And so Don and I put the curriculum together. There was, I think Dr. Dale Moore was part of the curriculum as well. And so I made an investment and continue to invest in the importance of leadership at the veterinary school level to help build a stronger level of leadership in the future, because we as a profession, being a doctor, we are assumed, we may not want to be, but we are assumed to be leaders. And so you at least have to understand what leadership is and to act like a leader so that you have the respect of the team with whom you work, no matter what role you're in the profession, whether it is in organized veterinary medicine, in sales, clinical practice, and even as a solopreneur who's got a mobile practice, you need to show leadership to your clients too.
Yeah, I think, so many of us who go into veterinary school, we do not have leadership at top of mind.
No.
We have patient care, we might have working with clients, but leadership really isn't up there. And I think, we sometimes forget that when we have that veterinary degree, that leader goes along with it. And I think it's important to have exposure to that early in our professional careers. Was there any way that, how were outcomes measured after that? You guys put so much time, money, effort into creating future leaders, including myself. What was the follow-up, if any, to know if it was successful? What were your measurements?
Yeah, Don did some follow-up surveys, I think, throughout the time you were in veterinary school. And we were looking at who became involved with the student government, who became involved with SAVMA, who became involved from the California VMA student reps, who became involved with clubs. And so there was some passive measures. I don't recall if he did formal surveys or not. I'm sure he did something because he was looking to put some articles together on it from that standpoint. So I think the measures are what people like yourself and Cindy Trice are doing, which indicates looking at the profession beyond the four walls of a clinic and what impact you can have, and both of you are doing so, and Cindy was part of that class as well, and others are doing to be influencers. And I don't necessarily mean social media influencers, so don't take me wrong on that. But influencing the profession and improving the profession going forward.
Yeah. So you mentioned Dr. Cindy Trice, and she is to this day one of my best friends. And we met during the leadership course. And I remember a heavy emphasis on, maybe we would call it team building or forming connections between the participants. Is that part of leadership?
Absolutely. What's a leader without followers?
Yeah.
And so, and true leadership right now is not necessarily about pushing people. It's about supporting people. And so we wanted to have a lot of team-based education in the leadership program. And we also wanted to make people uncomfortable because leaders are always being put into areas of discomfort. And so, yes, leadership, one of the true attributes in a leader is the ability to bring people from disparate backgrounds, different educations, different ages, different generations, different beliefs together to focus on a common vision and a common goal and all row together in the same boat and move that boat down the lake, the river, whatever the case may be.
Can you talk a little bit more about that discomfort? Because that really resonates with me. And I feel like I remember some moments of discomfort in that course, having to speak in public. That was something that was really uncomfortable for me. I remember discomfort being at the top of, we did like a ropes course, and I remember that very clearly. I mean, that was 25 years ago, and I can still kind of feel it. And, it sounds like there was a lot of intention behind it. I hear a lot now about people, kind of shying away from discomfort. In my mentorship program, I work with a lot of new veterinarians, obviously, and there is a lot of fear and discussion around not necessarily wanting to put ourselves in deeply uncomfortable situations, but it sounds like that's a very important piece of growth and leadership. Can you talk a little bit more about what's behind that?
I think what's behind discomfort is what's behind change. It is making subtle and slight improvements and taking you out of the rut that we tend to sit in comfortably. And there's a need for people who are in the rut because that's where their comfort zone is. And no matter how hard you try, you're not going to get them out of the rut. But if you truly want to move forward, you always have to take the first step. And that first step may be public speaking. I mean, listen, public speaking wasn't something I was comfortable with until I did my first presentation. God knows how many years ago it was, and I still have PTSD from that. But I think what our goal from a leadership standpoint, and I think it was Harry Truman who said, the goal of a leader is take somebody from where they are to someplace they never envisioned they could be. And so, and it may be one step at a time because you've got to take that first step. And I did it by getting involved with organized veterinary medicine and then getting involved with one of the other mentors I had was Dr. Tom Catanzaro, who probably has, up until recently, the only book that was dedicated to veterinary leadership that was released, God knows, 30 plus years ago. But he was a big advocate of leadership because of his involvement with the Boy Scouts. And so I learned a lot about leadership from him, and it was forced on me. And so he took the aggressive leadership push, which is, make people uncomfortable by pushing them out on the stage. There are more subtle ways to do so that slowly change the tadpole into a frog and not, immediately make them grow up and become a toad. So there, and I think there's some generational differences. I think that we have, in many ways, generations now that have been we don't make people uncomfortable, but I think it's important to be uncomfortable. I think it's important to have a little bit of that uncertainty and that pit in your stomach if you're going to move and change and influence. And listen, Dani, I know you well enough that to get to where you are now in what you're doing, there's been a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, and probably more tears than an IV catheter and fluids can replace. So it's something took and pushed you out of your comfort zone. Maybe I should reverse the trend, and we're going to put Dani under the microscope right now. What motivated you? And maybe you've answered this question, but what motivated you to stop just focusing on clinical practice and hopefully make a difference in the world of the people who are listening to this podcast or being a part of Ready Vet Go?
Well, it was really an accident. I didn't expect for it to happen. I am still a practicing clinical veterinarian. I love veterinary medicine and I love being a clinician. And I, feel like the growth of Ready Vet Go was almost something that just moved through me like a train that I couldn't really stop. I had a mentee in the summer of 2020 who really was inspirational in me launching this program. She had friends who were out and classmates, they were out in practice and didn't have the same type of mentorship support that she had with me as her mentor. And since it was the summer of 2020, we were all used to being on Zoom during the pandemic, and we started a Zoom group, and I was facilitating a bunch of new grads all over the country. And the questions that they had, they would come to these meetings with questions around medicine. And we all quickly learned that these new grads know medicine. They're spending 4 years learning all of this medicine. And what they struggle with is a lot of the things that, you talk about with leadership. And, things that I love to talk about, like client communication, connecting with clients and building trust. And I thought, after almost 20 years of being a veterinarian, and I still love vet med, and I am such a big cheerleader for this profession, I also am really good at some of those kind of non-clinical things. Maybe there's a connection between that. we have a well-being problem in veterinary medicine, and I fortunately have not experienced, a lot of burnout. I still have been very happy in this profession, and I think part of it has to do with, the connections that I've had with clients, feeling like I'm part of a positive practice culture, being a leader in the practice. And I thought, what if we could, sort of teach some of these things and support new grads and early career vets as they transition out of school into practice? And I had this idea and I couldn't stop it. And my first phone call was to Dr. Cindy Trice, who was an entrepreneur before me. And I said, I have an idea. Should I do it? And she said, absolutely. And, at that point, I felt like I had kind of the passion and the experience to launch it. But it was very, very scary. And after my call to Cindy, my first order of business was to join Vet Partners, which is the organization that you are really involved in. And that's where you and I got reconnected. And so, reaching out to other leaders and other people in the entrepreneurial space was like instrumental for me in launching it. So it was an accident, and here we are.
Yeah, so you went from mentoring one to virtually mentoring a group to now doing live mentoring. And so that's probably took you a lot out of your comfort zone, didn't it?
Oh my gosh, Peter. When you said that I probably had more tears than could be replaced with an IV fluid bag, you are not wrong. I mean, it has been a real challenge. It's been a roller coaster. And, every time I go through something that is challenging, it just kind of pushes me to keep going. And I've had moments where I just thought, this is too hard. I'm a really good clinician. Like, why did I decide to do this? I could just go back into the clinic and it's comfortable for me. But there is something about, having this passion for wanting to help the profession that has given so much to me, and to want to make sure that the early career vets who are joining this profession are brought up in a way that they can have longevity and sustainability. I can't stop now. And now we've grown. I mean, we're going to welcome our 200th student into the Ready Vet Go mentorship program this summer. And we have 20 trained Ready Vet Go mentors. And, I have this crazy thing. Who would have thought we would do a podcast?
Well,
even you have one.
Yeah, it's so what you've shown is resilience and grit, which to me are two attributes that the veterinary profession needs to have to deal with the variety of stressors that we're subjected to, some of which are internal, some of which are external. Your ability to fight through your discomfort is grit. And your ability to change, and I hate the word, but I'm going to use it, pivot, shows resilience. And so, when you're doing your mentoring, by the way, if you haven't figured this out, I just flipped the script and I am now interviewing Dani. And
He's so sneaky.
How important is it when you're working with these young professionals to encourage them to have grit and to show resilience and to be able to deal with unexpected variables that are going to hit them right between the eyes each day, every day, and all the time?
Oh, that's such a good question. One thing that I do in mentor training is I encourage mentors to share the worst mistake they ever made with their mentee. I did a mentor training for a large corporate group yesterday. I had 50 seasoned veterinarians on a Zoom call, and I put them into breakout rooms, 2 in a room. And I said, I want you guys to go into a room and spend 3 minutes each sharing the worst mistake you ever made in vet med. I started by sharing mine, and I said, I'd like you to share yours. And if it's something that you have carried with you, maybe there's shame around it, maybe you've never shared it out loud, try and dig deep and share that thing. And they did. And we came back in, and the outpouring of just, what a relief. Wow, I feel better. I have carried that around for decades. We have these things. And part of the reason I do this exercise is because I think we can cultivate grit in our mentees. And by having new veterinarians see that the people they look up to have been through hell and experienced something potentially catastrophic and are still here, kind of models grit a little bit. And so I don't know what the answer is, but that's one thing that I think is really important. I do hear from more, experienced veterinarians, and there's some generational component around the decreasing grit that we might see now. And I'm wondering, do you think that's true? Is there less grit now? If so, why? And really, what can we do to cultivate that in early career professionals? Is it something that we can select for when we're admitting people into veterinary school?
Boy, she just flipped it back on me, didn't she?
Wasn't that skillful?
It was very skillful. And it's interesting because, watch this.
Oh, stop. We're going to keep trying to do this for the next half hour.
You mentioned wellness and
Yeah.
well-being.
Yeah.
And, when I was in veterinary school in the dark ages, when tablets were made of stone and computers were basically orange screens, I think, we didn't really have or understand the issues that were out there. We just fought through them. And do you think that some of the wellness issues are A, generational, B, part of the selection process, which goes to your question that you're asking me, because I think we can talk about that, because
Yeah.
what goes into the funnel, which is, let's say, vet school acceptance, gets mushed around, educated, manipulated, and comes out the other end.
Yeah.
And what comes out the other end ends in the workforce. So when you put in a good piece of marble, different things can come out. But if you put in a less than good piece of marble, something bad can come out. So I think this question of resilience and grit and workforce and wellness and well-being all fits together.
Yeah.
And I think there have been some changes generationally, good, bad, or indifferent. I've got 2 millennial daughters who are tough. The youngest one is a veterinarian. So I watch her deal with many of the issues that you and I have dealt with over time. But I also have a group of veterinary students because I've been teaching at the veterinary school at Western. I've taken Don Klingborg's knowledge and moved it all down to Southern California. Thank you, Don. But I want to flip it back at you because you're younger than I am. You're probably networking with a lot more people on the wellness side of things than I am. What's your take? Are we creating? Are we selecting? Why are we dealing more with it? Or maybe it's just awareness.
I think there is awareness. I'm not completely sure. I think this is a real challenge, and I'm not totally sure how to answer it. I think there is some truth around the selection process that might be contributing to certain things. I think we create this environment where there's perfectionism, there is a lot of competition, there isn't a lot of teamwork. What I hear from veterinarians when they graduate is they're saying that some of the things that got them into and through veterinary school are the things that kind of backfire when they get out into practice. And so I don't know that we're doing such a good job of preparing people for the workforce when we have a spirit of, we kind of like promote a spirit of perfectionism and competition and lack of teamwork, because we know that veterinary medicine really is, it's a team sport. It sounds cheesy, but I think it's really true. And we need to rely on each other for being good clinicians and good veterinarians. And so I think some of it is the selection process. Some of it has to do with, the way we are bringing people up in veterinary school. A challenge that I see is fear. There is a lot of fear among new veterinarians. And I think this takes away from the grit that they have. I believe 100% that veterinary students today have grit. You have to get into veterinary school. And I really want to change that narrative, but something happens where we prevent people from showing how gritty they are and how much they can handle. And I think the fear piece really gets in the way sometimes. And I think the veterinary schools are doing a disservice. I can't tell you how many early career veterinarians that I work with who are afraid of trying a procedure, let's say, or a surgery, because it was impressed upon them that because they are not the most qualified person to do it, they have no business doing it. And so what do? We tell the client who potentially, can't or doesn't want to go to the referral clinic that I'm sorry, I have no other options for you, because if I do it, I'm going to be taken to the veterinary medical board. And so I think it adds to this fear, and that's a whole other, rock that I want to scream off of is, around this kind of fear that is being instilled in veterinary schools. So I think it's very complex and complicated. I don't think social media helps. I think the fear of online bullying, doesn't help. So I think these vet students are gritty, they have grit, and then something is happening potentially that makes it so that they can't be their best selves, really. And it does contribute to this well-being challenge. I don't know how you feel about all that.
It's a good point. I will share with you later a survey I do of the veterinary students coming into third year for my class about what they perceive as their needs from the class, which is on business and finance. The number one, and it was by a long large vote, the number one need that they wanted help with is communication. So if we go back and we look at your childhood and mine, which were paralleled but 20 years apart or thereabouts, I probably decided I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was early teens, maybe 10, 12. James Herriot just released All the Creatures Great and Small. So yes, I'm a James Herriot geek. Went to visit his hospital this summer.
Jealous.
Yeah, so it make the effort. But so you knew to become a doctor, MD, DVM, VMD, the dyslexic DVM, you needed to work hard. So at 15, I volunteered at a veterinary hospital, which you could do back then, and which some of the HR laws and everything else make it more difficult to do now.
Yeah.
And worked at that hospital probably through graduating from undergrad, and realized that I had to get good grades. So I grew up in New York, and Cornell was my best option to go to. So I worked my butt off to get into the undergraduate program at Cornell in animal science. So you work selectively. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is probably what you did as well. You work by yourself to study for tests in biology, chemistry, and physics throughout high school because you know you needed to excel. And you took the SATs and you spent a lot of time, and probably some of your parents' money, getting coached in the SATs, but you did that all by yourself.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does. Exactly.
And then you got into UC Davis undergrad, or where'd you go undergrad?
Believe it or not, Peter, I went to Cornell. I went.
My apologies. I did not.
I did not graduate from Cornell.
Okay.
I transferred to UC Davis when I realized that UC Davis is where I wanted to go for vet school. So I spent my first 2 years at Cornell.
Interesting. So, listeners,
We've known each other a long time and didn't know that.
I did the same thing.
You did?
I actually applied to transfer to Davis for my third year when I was at Cornell. So I did my first 2 years, and I got in.
What?
But
Who knew this parallel journey?
But instead, I took a year abroad and studied at Trinity College in Dublin and came back and did my fourth year at Cornell. I really wanted to transfer to Davis. I thought living in California was going to be great, and eventually moved to California. But whether it was at Cornell, sitting in that lecture hall, I don't know if Keaton was still teaching at the biology class because he wrote the freaking textbook.
Oh, yeah.
And then Hoffman, who was a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, teaching organic chemistry. You know, we're sitting in these classrooms with the first 2 years with 1,100 to 1,500 other wannabes who were fighting for our spot in vet school or medical school. You had that same feeling, right?
100%.
And then on the weekends, while everybody else was partying, you were at the library, or I was at the library. And I used to go to the Ithaca College library because it was quieter than the Cornell libraries because nobody at Ithaca College went to the library. Sorry for those of you Ithaca College grads.
No shade on Ithaca.
Yes.
I had the same experience being in the library. And when I would leave and walk back to my dorm from the library, the only lights that would be on would be in the engineering and architecture buildings because they were also up studying late, just like we were.
Absolutely. And, you know, when everybody else is in college town and drinking, you're thinking.
Yeah.
And so the stinking thinking you do by yourself.
Yeah.
And so because you know you have to do well in undergrad
Yeah.
to get into the veterinary school.
Right.
Like deja vu.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I joined a fraternity, which was great on one hand, and probably prevented me from getting into veterinary school on the other. Did you join a sorority?
I did not.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
So you knew what fraternity life at Cornell was like. It was one of the best social situations. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was in vet school, the drinking age was 18.
What?
Not vet school, in undergrad. When I was an
Oh my
undergrad at
gosh.
Cornell, the drinking age was 18.
Ah.
So every weekend
Yeah.
was a freaking party.
Yeah. I mean, it still is, even if the drinking age is not 18.
and let's just say that there was some of that illegal green stuff that we called, you know, being circulated. And so my keeping up with the Joneses academically was influenced by my keeping up with the Joneses socially.
You have to.
So my GPA was impacted,
Yeah.
which is why I was thinking of transferring, because I thought maybe I could do better somewhere else. So we have a lot of parallels.
We do.
Except
Yeah.
you decided to go to Davis and stayed there. I went to Ireland, learned how to drink better
I bet.
beer,
I bet.
and then came back and did my fourth year. But all of this,
Yeah.
all by myself. I did it all by myself. So we grew
Yeah.
up as solos.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't singing in a group.
Right.
And then we got into vet school.
Yeah.
Now, how did it feel in vet school once you got in?
Well, I mean, for me, I started off
With the
in
leadership
the
pro-
leadership course.
Yes.
So I don't know how it would have felt without that. But I do know from chatting with classmates who were not in the leadership course that it took them longer to form connections with people because we had tight bonds. When we
Right.
showed up and there was like 20 something of us who had already been through the leadership course and were very bonded and connected, we thrived that first year. And honestly, I don't know what it would have been like without that.
Yeah. So, but I remember, at least I think I remember, it was a long time ago, orientation in central Illinois, because I ended up having to move to Illinois to get into veterinary school. Some of the faculty gets up there and say, turn to your left, turn to your right. One of you is not going to be there at graduation.
Whoa.
And I think it's a threat,
Yeah.
which is, you want to talk about fear,
Right.
scares the cow manure out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not a good way to get started,
No, definitely not.
nor is immunology.
Amen. So do you feel like this kind of solo experience of getting into veterinary school, is that still what vet students are experiencing? And is that contributing to some of what we've touched on, which is, the well-being concerns and what we've talked about with grit? Is that all connected?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. I believe we have grit going in,
Yeah.
just like, the crop of a chicken does,
Yeah.
to be able
Yeah.
to digest things.
Yeah.
And then I think we have a gritectomy during
Yeah.
the 4 years of veterinary school.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is still hyper competitive.
Yeah.
We've got really competitive individuals going into school. So if you look at it statistically, we got into veterinary school because we were on the far right-hand side of the bell-shaped curve.
Yeah.
Then we went into undergraduate program with a whole bunch of other people from the right-hand side of the bell-shaped curve, which means many of us moved toward the middle of the bell-shaped curve,
Yep.
present company.
Yeah.
Some of that was weekends in Ithaca. And then we got into veterinary school, which is all of the freaking people on the right-hand side of the bell-shaped curve. Well, somebody's got to get a B, and
Yep.
somebody's going to get a C. And then there'll be a handful of people who are getting an A. So it doesn't change when you get into the veterinary curriculum, which is why I would argue that once you're into a professional school, why don't we do pass-fail? Why don't we just have a set passing grade, let's call it 75 or 80, whatever you want to be, and do it pass-fail? Why do we need to have a number to indicate who we are and where we stand? Why do we set up a competitive environment in a professional curriculum for what you said is correct, a profession that requires us to work with others in a collaborative fashion?
Yeah.
So why shouldn't we be learning how to take tests together? I want to call, who wants to be a millionaire? 3 things: phone a friend, ask the audience, and 50-50. That's
Yeah.
how we should take tests.
Oh, I love it.
Because, when I did my first time management class
Yeah.
to vet students
Yeah.
20 some odd years ago, probably around 25 years ago, I suggested that the things that they need to learn are the table of contents and the index. Because you can
Yeah.
find everything in the table of
Right.
contents in the index. Why memorize the 1,800 pages in between
Yeah.
when you're going to really be spending the vast majority of your life looking things up? So really, we need to learn how to find answers, not
Yeah.
memorize answers.
Oh, I love this so much. I mean, this is just such an important statement. I love it. Is anybody doing this? You're pretty embedded with, kind of knowing what's going on in so many aspects of veterinary medicine, but also the veterinary schools. Are there schools who are having this kind of pass-fail model? Is it being talked about? We've got a lot of new schools that are in the pipeline. Is this happening?
I think some of the schools have instituted it, and if I'm wrong, erase the tape. I believe Washington State has integrated it to a degree. I don't know if any other schools have, but there are a number of medical schools that have integrated it for human health care. In the course that I teach, there are individual homework assignments, but they're all practical, resume budgets and things of that nature. And it's not, I don't grade a resume as being an A, B, C, or D. I just give them, if they turn it in on time management, they get an A. And so I think what we need, and then their final project is a group project. I want them to work together in a group to do something, and it includes a Shark Tank, or it can include an interview. It can include any of a number of different things, because learning how to work together in a group is what the world is all about. So Western and those schools that have integrated PBL, the problem-based learning program, where you have to work together to solve a case with other students, I think that is a direction that's extremely important. And I will give a shout out for the students at Western who I believe come out with better interpersonal communication skills because of the requirement of working with others to solve problems.
Yes, I have noticed that from Western. I've noticed that from some Arizona students, and just, working with a lot of different students from a variety of different schools. I think that's really interesting. We have a lot of veterinary students who are in the Ready Vet Go community and might be listening, and most of them are not going to be in schools that have problem-based learning or are on a pass-fail. What advice do you have for these students now to help them with the way the model is, or the way the structure is, to help ensure that they can have really, kind of satisfying careers, and they can not, to use your words, have a gritectomy when they're in school? How do they combat that?
I think Brooke said it to me, Dr. Brooke Weinstein, plug for Brooke.
Yay, Dr. Brooke.
She said to me, and it's something we've said for generations, C equals DVM.
Yep.
So there are aspects of your post-veterinary education where your GPA will make a difference.
Yep.
And that's usually if you're doing an internship or residency, or maybe applying for a MPH, Master Public Health.
Yep.
But when I graduated, and when you graduated, did any of the veterinarians with whom you interviewed ask you what your GPA was?
Not one.
And did any client ask you what your GPA was?
Not one.
And in California, the clients will ask, did you go to Davis?
Yes, they do ask
So
that.
they did ask that, and I said, no, I went to Illinois. I went to a better school. So I think it's important to, and when I was at Illinois going to veterinary school, where I knew I wasn't doing an internship or residency, I went to every home football game. I went to as many basketball games as I could, and I made sure that I integrated some of the social components of it, because all I wanted to do was pass the courses. Now, there were 14 of us who got D's in immunology, but does that reflect the students or the faculty?
Right.
And so is it the chef or is it the recipe? And so I just wonder if some of the issues that we're dealing with are a morass of hyper-perfection isolated students put into a hyper-perfection isolated curriculum, taught to be hyper-perfected individuals, and thrown out into a world where they have to collaborate with others.
Yes, exactly.
And I argue that no veterinary practice should have less than 3 full-time equivalent doctors working together, because that's how you learn, is with others. And many of the stressors, and you may be able to vouch for this more than I can, but as an individual hospital owner, when I owned my hospital, it was so much more stressful when I didn't have another doctor there to look at radiographs with, go over laboratory work with, or even talk to about a surgical procedure. So I really do think multi-doctor facilities are an imperative for students coming out of school. And that's not being the second doctor, where the first doctor is going to go play golf on day one. That's being the third or fourth doctor, where you can learn from others and learn how to work and collaborate in a team with other doctors as well. So I think a lot of the stress is part of going through the curriculum. A lot of the stress is the individuals going into the curriculum. And I don't think we're I teach at a vet school, and I'm going to say something. I'm not sure we're doing the perfect job in preparing for life after veterinary school.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I hear in some of what you're saying sort of like a permission for veterinary students to really let go of some of that perfectionism because it's not going to serve you, and let go of the desire to get perfect grades, and a permission to really embody the C equals DVM. I mean, it's a funny thing that we say, but there is a lot of truth behind that. The vast majority of us are not internship and residency bound. They're just not. And so, it really doesn't serve us to hang on to that. And then I hear you saying also that advice for new grads would be to join a practice where there are multiple doctors, where they can have this kind of collaborative and team approach, to learn from.
Yeah. Well, and I would challenge the veterinary schools to integrate more veterinarians who have been in private practice to be part of the teaching faculty for third and fourth years.
Yeah.
At Illinois, and I'm sure at Davis, many of the clinicians, the interns, residents, and overseeing veterinarians had not really been in a clinical setting
Yeah.
in Sacramento or the East Bay or Compton or Long
Yeah.
Beach or Orange County. And there's a big difference between tertiary care and primary care. And there's a big difference between clients who are coming in to a private practice setting. So one of the best faculty that I had in veterinary school was in surgery, and he had come from private practice back to doing a residency in surgery, and he showed us how to get down to the very little nub of the suture material, because when you're in private practice, you're trying to save money by using the entire spool instead of what I felt in vet school, is each stitch was a separate.
Right.
So I think all you millionaires out there who might be listening to this, that venture capital made rich in the last 5 years, and you're looking for something to do, see about getting on faculty and teaching at the veterinary school that's close to you, and teach these young doctors how to become successful veterinarians, not just successful veterinary students.
I think that is such important advice. I hope the people who are in those positions are listening. I know, over the last couple of years, I have been speaking more at veterinary schools. If I'm invited by the VBMA or a local chapter of, one of the organizations, I have not, I have yet to be invited to come and speak, or have yet to push myself into the door to speak to the classes at large. But when I go in and I speak, it's always about either mentorship or communication, because those are the things that I'm super passionate about. And when I go in, I can't tell you how many of the students are so grateful to hear, not only from a general practitioner who's been out in practice for a while and is taking kind of, real world sort of, experience to teach these students, but they also say that it is a real breath of fresh air to hear from somebody who's in practice and still enjoying it. And I think that's another miss, that somehow people think that if we are sort of jaded or burnt out or unhappy, that we should now be speaking to veterinary students. And I disagree. I think, we don't want to sugarcoat or gloss over any of the challenges that we're having in our profession, but let's bring in general practitioners or private practitioners who also still love the profession and have figured out tips and tricks that have kept them happy for many, many years.
Yeah, I had the opportunity a number of years ago to speak in Orlando at VMX with Dave Nickel. Mm-hmm. And so Dave and I, our talk was bringing fun back into veterinary medicine.
Love it.
And my job was to keep him from using the F word.
Yeah, he
so I used it. But I think that's where we are right now. I think people like yourself, Cindy, some of the young influencers who are the next generation can be influenced to have fun again. Listen, a proctologist looks at one dark hole all day. We play with puppies.
Yeah.
We play with kittens. We deal with disease. We deal with death. But we do it in an environment that should be supportive and fun. And yes, there are external stressors. Some of those are clients. Some of the problems we create ourselves are internal stressors. We need to figure out, and I'm going to go back to the thing that we started with, however many minutes ago was, leadership. Leadership determines whether you have fun or not.
Yep.
Okay? You can have a very serious leader, and you can have a fun leader. And if you can be serious when you need to be and fun the vast majority of the time, you will build a positive culture within your practice. Your team is looking for somebody that allows them to relax, to take a deep breath, and to have some fun. And whether that is taking the dental units, the water thing, and squirting people with it, whether it is, making jokes or, expressing anal glands. And if, for those of you who don't know anal glands, look it up. In people's hair. That's nasty.
Don't do that.
No, don't do that. But, we need, I think the goal for the next 10 years in veterinary medicine, in the face of everything that's going on, is we need to bring fun back into veterinary medicine. We focus too much in social media, too much in the news magazines about the dark side.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get rid of Darth Vader and let's go to the bright side.
Amen. I love this so much. And I love that you're out there talking about bringing the fun back. And, there's many of us out there who really just believe in what you're saying and are trying to change the narrative. I would argue that there are more of us out there having fun than are not.
Right.
And we're just not out there on social media telling the world how much fun we're having. We're just going to work every day and loving our jobs and contributing to a positive practice culture.
Right.
We're just like getting out of time, and I feel like I could talk to you forever. I'm wondering, if we can just end with sort of like summarizing this combining of fun and leadership, because leadership really is what we have talked about throughout this last hour. What are, you mentioned a couple, you mentioned ways that people can bring fun back into work. What are ways we can bring leadership in, especially for the new grads and early career veterinarians? They are leaders. How can they incorporate leadership in their day-to-day? What would you like to see them doing? Is it organized veterinary medicine the way you were, brought up in your early career? What are some actionable steps that these early career veterinarians can take to become leaders and maintain the fun?
It's a great question. Let me flip it on you, and then I'll answer it.
Okay.
What does your program and what do you do to help give them the tools to be leaders and to have fun? Let's highlight what Ready Vet Go does in that area.
Thank you for highlighting that. Ready Vet Go, puts a lot of emphasis on creating leaders. We first off, we just start right off the bat by letting people know when you have that veterinary degree, leader comes attached to it. And so whether you like it or not, this is the position that you're in. And we form small groups, we call them packs, and it's groups of 3 to 4 mentees matched with a Ready Vet Go mentor. They meet twice a month over the course of 12 months, and they really talk about the challenges that they're having in practice, and we help empower them to take accountability for creating change within their own practice. It's a big part of what we do. We do some role playing, which is sometimes a little bit awkward and clunky, but I think using language that is uncomfortable to us and practicing that in a safe space. We're all, we create psychologically safe spaces where people can practice saying uncomfortable things so that they can then take it back into their clinics and impart change. We start right off the bat with the Ready Vet Go mentorship program using a mentee skills training course that I adapted from the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. Dr. Doug Freeman and some of his colleagues at Western in Canada created a mentee skills training to basically empower veterinary students to be self-directed learners. And I think there's a lot of leadership in self-directed learning. And so we just start right off with the mentee skills, and we're just setting a foundation for leadership from the get-go. And so we use tools that have been created from experts and leaders in our field. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're taking what is, evidence-based and true and we know is effective and bringing that into the Ready Vet Go mentorship program. And so that's the foundation. And then we bring in loads of leaders. We have lots of people who are experts in the veterinary profession who come in and have a platform to speak and do small workshops over the course of the 7-month program to teach the early career vets about leadership. And it's kind of a through line throughout the entire program.
That's great, and I'm glad you integrate the gecko. There we go.
Yep.
See, you got to make jest of things. It's like the clients who want the bordello shot.
Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah.
Right after we vaccinate the rabbi.
Right.
and the fact that we're having lunch next to a fecalizer, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it goes into who goes into veterinary school and who comes out is people who have not necessarily had fun. And I think it's important for the veterinary schools to maybe try to figure out how to make the curriculum more fun. Mm-hmm. And that's where collaborative problem solving comes in. Yep. That's where ropes courses comes in. Yep. That's where basically choosing people with higher EQ over those with higher IQ. Yep. So from a leadership standpoint, yes, veterinary medicine is a serious healthcare profession. Yeah. but we are a service industry.
Yep.
And we got to provide service first so we can provide health care. Service needs to be fun. You know, if you watch the people who are at some of the high-end hotels, Ritz-Carlton, Fairmont, they're having fun. Whether it's the waitresses and the staff at the restaurants or the people greeting you or the people cleaning. We just need to have fun. And whether it's title changes, and so everybody who works for veterinary hospital is a professional problem solver instead of a CSR, technician, assistant, whatever it is from that standpoint, it starts at the top. Let me say this again. It starts at the bottom. Because if we look at servant leadership, the role of a leader is to support the team. Good leaders are good listeners. So you turn to the team and say, how do we bring fun in? And you guys are in charge of bringing fun. I used to take my staff to the Improv for our holiday dinner. You know, yes, did it get a little bit off color at times? Sure. Did it give us something to talk about on Monday? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's doing those things that are fun. I had a practice I worked with that brought everybody to the mall, gave them $100, and they had to go spend the money and come back and model whatever they bought. I think it decreased the people going to Victoria's Secret.
Right.
But and so I think all of these things can be fun.
Yeah.
How do we bring fun back into the profession? Listen to those around you, ask them questions, and then have them help you create that fun environment.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I love it because these are things that new and early career veterinarians can do on day one of joining a new practice. These are things that we can incorporate, and we don't need to be on the boards of our local VMAs. We might get there eventually, but these are things that you can implement on day one as a veterinarian. And so I love that.
Yep.
I'm already planning the class that you and I are going to teach together, talking about bringing fun back in. This is amazing. I love that you are out there talking about these important things and doing it in the way you do, which is with humor and joy and curiosity and understanding. I never hear judgment ever coming from you. You know, I hear that you want to be a disruptor and a change maker, but you know, you do it in such a way that I think really resonates with people. It definitely does with me. And this has been the best hour. I could just keep going. I'm so grateful for your time, and thank you so, so much for being here.
Well, I can't tell you how proud I am of you for what you have accomplished and for grabbing the baton and continuing the relay and, you know, continually looking for the next person to pass the relay baton to. So that's my job at this stage, is to continue to support people like yourself to ensure that the profession is better for all of us down the road.
Well, you're doing a really good job of that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dani.